industrial district with Harry Ferguson and Ferguson tractor. Following that, Fordson, with Craig Fergie there, that's the original T20, the one that you can find on nearly every farm in the country in the years 1930 until it was replaced by the 35. Harry Ferguson and Henry Ford's war developed when Ferguson and he finally departed one another. Ford bought out two Fordson Dexter tractors, the next two blue ones, both of which were designed to compete with the Ferguson. He didn't really win the battle, Harry Ferguson did. Here we've got another Fordson Dexter. It's rather later one from those two, moved on a further generation, and this is an even further move on in the generation, that Fordson Dexter there. Tractors like that these days are little mini toys. They have very little application on most farms. The T20 there following up, the petrol-driven one. The engine in that is a standard Vanguard car engine. Standard Vanguard cars works has taken over in Banner Lane at Coventry, and the government gave the works to Harry Ferguson, and he used the engine of the standard Vanguard to power his T20 tractor. This tractor here, the Farmall, was imported from America on the Wall End scheme. The United States government sent us an awful lot of tractors over. Quite a lot ended up at the bottom of the Atlantic Sea. That one got here, a very light tractor, about the same sort of power as those Dexters and the T24. Then you got onto a much more grown-up Fordson, the Cormac. They're the big red tractor that again imported. They were very, very good tractors that came over. They were totally different from our requirements. You can see they're much taller and leaner, but they were very good, particularly in arable work and that sort of thing. Very adaptable wheel outlines and that sort of thing. David Brown, who originally had a relationship with Harry Ferguson, decided that having not made it to partner Ferguson in the development of his tractor, David Brown set up a factory in South Yorkshire and decided to build his own tractor. At the beginning of the Second World War, he was very lucky because his tractor was quickly adapted to tow bombers around airfields. He sold an awful lot of them to the government. A lot were exported to airfields across the world. That's one of the very early David Brown, certainly not one of the earliest. We come now to another Dagenham Ford. That Ford was produced towards the end of the Second World War and was a tractor that was both, I should add, most of the tractors in here are diesel. Those two over there are both petrol TVOs, that Fordson there. The BMC, the British Motor Company, went into tractor production. They decided first of all to build a little mini tractor. And they built that little orange thing there, which unfortunately never really took off. Another one was the President, that was a very similar thing. That David Brown, following up there, the red tractor, the David Brown Cropmaster, very, very similar to the tractors that were used on airfields throughout the Second World War, towing bombers around and so on. Another Ferguson 35 behind it would be Fordson Major. The next stage of Henry Ford's development was to develop that Fordson Major. He then went up to Ford 4000, Ford 5000. Ford by now was really developing fast. Ferguson had linked up to Massey Harris. Fordson was still independent. Fordson today is actually part of a group that comprises Fiat and another other continental manufacturers. You see that grey Fergie G20 there, one of the very original ones, standard Vanguard engine, 2-furrow plough. Very popular, you can tell, for ploughing matches. He's got his plough markers on the back. The Ford 3600, the first grade up from the Fordson Dexter, and we're talking now about that tractor came out about 1958, 1960, somewhere in there. Another Ford Fergie 35 with a very nice toolbox on the back, obviously used for engineering work and that sort of thing. Then a firm called Pies came on the scene, and Pies decided to put more guts into the Fords, and County were another one. That's a County four-wheel drive. They took Ford 5000 like one over there, put four-wheel drive on it, gave it a lot more pulling power, and made it a pretty useful tractor, but not very manoeuvrable on small fields with a great big front steering wheel. Probably now one of the most reliable, lasting tractors produced. Marshalls made steam engines in the late 19th, early 20th century. They decided they were going to make a tractor. They produced that single-cylinder diesel, the Marshall. They started it with a handle and a cartridge, and it would go on all day, powering anything that needed powering. It was used for thrashing drums, large-scale balers, and that sort of thing. But those engines, that Marshall diesel engine, would just go on banging away all day long. It was portable power for British agriculture after at the end of the Second World War and through into the 50s and 60s. Another Fergie 35, another Fergie 35, three Fergie 35s there. We come back now to this grey Ferguson with the gold engine. That was the first diesel engine that's outside the T20 that Harry Ferguson produced. It was a good enough engine, but it was a poor starter. It got very unpopular. There's a Restoration 4000 there. Tractors like that, pick them up a little, get them rebuilt, could be worth a lot of money in 5 or 10 years' time. The restoration business is big business now. Then you've got the start of the revolution, the John Deere. Only in America, originally it's got power steering, came into this country right at the end of the Second World War, petrol-driven TVO engine, big row crop tractor. The Americans, I won't tell you what they called them, but they reckoned they were unbreakable. Now, this is what's happened. We've moved up into these huge monsters. John Deere now probably, you could say, the largest tractor company in the world. If you go to Russia, if you go to many parts of Africa, all over Eastern Europe, John Deere are there in huge numbers. They have their own schools, they've got their own technology centre, and of course their English development centre is in fact just up the road at Grantham. And to go there is to have an education in agricultural technology and engineering. They are enormous. I thought it would take years for that scale of tractor to come in Britain, and they've come practically overnight. New Holland there, Fords eventually went into the new group. They merged with the New Holland company, which originally started in Amish country in Pennsylvania. Most of the tractors were built originally in combines built by the Amish community. They now have grown up, the New Holland has gone on, Fiat Agri, and this is the scale of the British agriculture that we have in front of us today. And then the final chart at the end here, which is, it's nearly got me beat. It's a Valtra. Yeah? It's not.